Grand Rising, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here, and it's wonderful to be here. So, the steps we take. So, just by a show of hands, who's familiar with the show called What Would You Do with John Quinones is the host? Has anybody seen this show? I see a couple. Okay. So for all those that don't know, What Would You Do? It's a TV show where they set up these social situations. And they're challenging. They have actors play these roles. And so sometimes, it might be like in a restaurant setting where the actor is acting in like maybe a racist way towards the waiter. And then the hidden cameras just to kind of see, like, what would people do? And there's other ones where might have to advocate for somebody I saw one where the mom was leaving a baby in the car to run inside to a store and grab a few things, and people had to make like split-second decisions. Do we say something, or do we play it safe and not? And for the most part, human nature, we play it safe. But there's a few, like the show's highlight is these extraordinary people that step up. They'll speak out on behalf of somebody else, a complete stranger. They're kind of putting themselves at risk to say, hey, this isn't right. Now, myself, when I watch these shows, I'd like to think if I was in that situation, we watch it, we're like, oh, if I was there, I would definitely say something. But do we really know until we're there? And what is it about the people that do stand up and say something that sets them apart? Where do they come from? What I want to say is it's a form of self-actualization that these people, they've connected with something within, a value or a quality within that says, this is very important, and they don't even have time to think. They just get up and they act. And so that's where we're looking at this month. When we're talking about going from good to great to grand, we're looking at the process of self-actualization. And today we're going to look at the steps of how we do that. So it begins with identifying and aligning. So I forgot to bring the sheet up. So for anybody who was here last week, when Linda Lloyd, our practitioner, spoke, she had a sheet for us and an exercise that has all these qualities, and it's just to kind of get your thought process thinking that we go through and pick 20 of these qualities that are important to us. And then we narrow it down to 5. And so we're looking at these qualities within us and deciding like what's most important. So this process, really, I see it as part of what we call the triune nature. The triune nature, mind, body, soul, is one way that the triune nature shows up in our experience. And so in our soul, our innermost level, don't get hung up on the word soul, but it's that deeper part of us that's always existed, that always will. It's our consciousness of the one consciousness. When people say, that I think we just, human beings, we know right from wrong within. That's in our heart space. We have this sense. And so that, to me, comes from the soul. But then it moves over into the mind. And when it's in the mind, this is where we either, consciously identify and affirm, like, these are the qualities that are important to me. But it's also in the mind where we bargain. So we have, our qualities that we think are important to us, but then when we're out in the real world, sometimes our mind can compromise. You're like, yes, this maybe isn't the right thing to do, but there's a lot of money in it for me. Or I know I should maybe say something here, but I might get hurt if I do. Like, it's our mind, our thinking part that rationalizes and directs how we show up. And then the body aspect, one is the physical world that we live in and how we show up in that. And then the second is our actual physical body. So when we're not necessarily in alignment, when we know something true to be in our heart, but then our mind has rationalized that we can bend a little bit on that one, then all of a sudden, like, we're not in congruence with that higher part of ourselves. And so when that happens, we describe it a lot of times, you'll hear it in these centers that, it's a form of, we're not at ease. It's dis-ease. And so when we're not in alignment, things show up in our life that can manifest in our body as actual illnesses. And I'm certainly not saying that all diseases are from the incongruence, but The medical industry will definitely point out that when we're stressed or when we're not in alignment with what we say is important, it can manifest things in our body. So this going from good to great to grand and to really becoming clear on who we are and aligning with it, it's important. Now, I really liked Malika's meditation when she talked about the seeds that we're planting and clearing out the clutter and the leaves. Because those inklings that we get from our soul, those are the seeds that are within us. But what I think, I know, I'm speaking from my own personal experience. All my life, I've had a sense of what those qualities are that are important to me. I think I know who and where I stand. But I had never necessarily sat down and become perfectly clear on it. That's why I really loved Linda's exercise for us, which I think there's still a few sheets out there if you weren't here last week and you would like to do it. It's important to sit down and just analyze, who am I? What is important? What are my 5 most important qualities and values so that in those situations, like on the show with John Quinones, when they come up, we know. We act because we've already clarified in our own minds what's most important. But when we're not clear on it and then these situations show up, it's a lot easier to compromise on our beliefs. And so, like I said, I'd like to think when I watch that show, I would definitely stand up and say something in that situation. But I've been in those situations. I think we all have. And I look back to how many times I missed the opportunity. I dropped the ball, and I left somebody on their own that could have used somebody to speak up for them. And in hindsight, looking back I wish I would have done that. But we increase our likelihood of it when we go through these processes and decide what it is that's really important to us. So through our steps, identifying our values is the first one that Linda took us through last week. Our first step this week is then just to bring that into our conscious awareness and aligning with it. And then the next step is to set an intention with it so that we do show up in that way. And now one other thing that I would like to preface with, I know the times, I don't know all the times that I've faltered. I'm sure there's times that I didn't even recognize when I missed the mark. But when I have, I want to encourage us and remind myself, to go easy on ourselves. Because the majority, on those shows, the majority of the people that don't speak up, I'm not saying these people are in the wrong, because it's the people that do that are stepping so far out of our human nature. Because it's part of our DNA to play it safe. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of human beings when we lived, the caveman days, when we would live in clans, tribes. If you did something that made you stand out too far from the group, that made other people uncomfortable, you would get ostracized, expelled from the group. And back then, that would mean basically a death sentence to try to survive on your own in those times. And that's programming is still part of what we are. So we have this sense of playing it safe. But we have evolved, and we are at this place now where we are creating that world that works for everyone, creating a shift in consciousness. And this is the time where more and more people that listen to their heart and speak up and show up are needed. This is the time. So I want us all to go easy on ourselves when we forget, when we miss that opportunity to stand up and be our authentic self and stand outside of the herd. When we miss that, go easy on ourselves. This is a process. It's a continual process, and it doesn't do us any good to beat ourselves up. So Maya Angelou, this is one of my favorite quotes of hers: if you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. The time of just trying to fit in, that doesn't serve us anymore. We need the extraordinary individuals that stand up. So now the idea of that, planting that intention. I love the way the universe works, mind, consciousness works, because while I was working on this talk throughout the week, I came across a really interesting story, and it's about the Stanford prison experiment. I'm not sure who's familiar with it. There's a movie that they actually made about it. It came out in 2015, which I've started it. It's on Prime and Hulu and a couple other places that you can watch. But anyway, 1971, Stanford University, a psychologist wanted to see how, he wanted to study a bit about human nature and see how humans adapt to fitting into a new role or a new situation that's outside of their norm. And he wanted to see how people adjust their personalities. So they created a fake prison. He's put out an ad for participants in this study. And when people came in, he made, half of them were prison guards and half were prisoners. And the instructions were pretty basic. When the guards showed up, they all got matching uniforms, a pair of sunglasses, and a billy club, so that they all had this sense of their group, their unity. The prisoners were picked up by real police officers, blindfolded, brought to this place. The guards had them stripped down, delouse them, put on their prison clothes, and receive their number on their prison shirt, that was their new identity. That's the only way they could identify is that number. And other than that, they said, the guards will be watching the prisoners, and the people doing the study will be watching everything through cameras that were out of sight. And that was about the only instructions. Well, right off the bat, one of the guards stepped into the role wholeheartedly. And he, in one of the interviews I saw, he's like, I really wanted to live this and do it. And he became cruel and demeaning, and it was just a mean person to these prisoners. And you could see the prisoners adjusting pretty quickly into this role of just being dehumanized, and the way we kind of constrict or restrict, when we're not feeling our biggest selves. Within 36 hours, one of the participants had a mental breakdown and had to leave. The study was supposed to last 2 weeks, but after 6 days, there was such mental and emotional trauma amongst both sides of the group, they had to stop the experiment. This is one of the original experiments that has led to, the ethics commissions now that they scrutinize very closely now the way we do experiments, because these people were actually traumatized. But the reason I'm bringing this in is because, let me go on a little bit more about the one guard. Afterwards, when they stopped the experiment, and then they did, debriefing interviews and stuff, exit interviews, the one guard that became, really got into it, and then the other guys joined in, he said he shocked himself. He couldn't believe the way that he acted towards these prisoners, towards other human beings. And it's something that I like to point out very often is all of us, we have the infinite potential of the divine, which is, when I say infinite, from the worst, most heinous qualities to the highest and most admirable qualities. We have all of that within all of us at all times. And we're always making choices of how we show up. But if we're not aware that those other qualities are there, they can creep in when we're not expecting them. So my belief here is that if that one guard had done this kind of work before, if he had become clear on what his qualities were and then set that intention, I don't think he would have taken it to the degree that he did, if he would have taken it there at all. So I think that's why we have this power, but we have to be consciously using it. All my life, I've had these qualities that I believed to be important to me, but I never sat down. There's a couple instances where I have sat down and I have set intentions, and it saved me later. But for the most part, it's just a belief. I'd like to think these qualities are important to me, but until we cement them in, it can be easy to falter off of that. So Ernest Holmes, quote, so this is from the book called Living the Science of Mind. He says, when we fail to live in accord with the divine, so those qualities within that we know, when we fail to live in accord with that, we bring suffering on ourselves. So that's part of this end goal of self-actualizing, of working towards that higher ideal and living it in our lives. So identifying a line, and then we set these intentions to know, this is who and what's important to me, and this is where I'm going to step up. And then the third part is action. This is where we take it out into the world and live it. So reminding ourselves, or reminding myself, that we are spiritual beings. Everything that exists is this spiritual realm in mind, and the physical universe is the spiritual, it's the physical manifestation, the body of the infinite of what we are, whatever you want to call that thing. I use the word God quite frequently, but it's just a label. It's just the thing that is. And then we are a human having that human experience. Spiritual being having a human experience, not the other way around. And so, when I did Linda's list and went through and clarified some of my highest goals and qualities, well, one of them that really stood out to me was kindness. And within that, compassion and forgiveness, acceptance, these are qualities that are in there. And so, again, I just wanted to remind us, or to invite us all to just hold that kindness and compassion for ourselves. Because we are human beings, and from the example of what would you do? These situations arise, and the window of making the decision of how we want to be is very short. And we are going to miss it. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to falter. But in the words of Jason Mraz, the musician, when he says we win some or we learn some. It's not win or lose. It's not failure when we don't live up to our thing, because it's not failure when we remember to learn from it, to grow, to really anchor in who it is that we are. Sometimes when we make those mistakes and fall short of what our ideals are, sometimes we can make up for it. We can make amends and reach out. Sometimes, especially with strangers, that moment's gone and past, and we may not. But it doesn't do us any good to judge ourselves, to judge others, or to beat ourselves up. We need to remind ourselves that we are human being, having this human being experience, and we're meant to trip from now and again. But as we do that with consciousness and awareness, and that intention to move closer and closer to what we know in our inner being, life flows and it ripples out. And this is how we shift the world. Because when we talk about a shift in consciousness on a global level, we can't reach our self-actualization as a collective if one of us isn't there. So we could say, self-actualization, the definition I gave the first week of the month is just, as a human being, living the highest potential we have as a human being. So on the collective, it's living the highest potential as the collective. But if we've all reached our highest ideal, but you're holding back, waiting for everything else, then the collective hasn't reached it either. And so the best thing that we can do for all of us is making our own work, doing our own processes to move more into alignment with that who and what we are. Patience, compassion as we work through it, because Lord knows we will fail every now and then. But we get back up and we do it again, and we get more and more of those wins as we learn. So here's a quote from Dr. Roger Teal. He's a Science of Mind minister for many years at Mile High Church in Denver, who is now since retired. But anyway, this is from a book of his, and he says, "Every one of us is born to make manifest the glory of God. The most powerful way to fulfill this high calling is to discover and empower your soul's sincere desire, and then to allow this soulful clarity to provide leadership for your choices, intentions, prayers, and actions." So letting those qualities that we have within lead us and guide us into how to show up in this world. So that'll take us to our spiritual principle for the week. We are spiritual beings. So the one infinite reality is both transcendent and immanent. That infinite reality, it's beyond us, and it's also within us and as us. So individual human beings are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe, having a human experience. This is our true nature. So we're divine. There is no, we can make mistakes in this human realm, but in the realm, there is no mistakes. everything leads us to that one place. So let's have fun. Let's go easy on ourselves. And our spiritual practice is the practice of direct revelation. As individualized expressions of the one infinite reality, we have access to the infinite wisdom and intelligence of the ultimate reality. That knowing that we have in our heart, that's revelation from the deeper presence of which we are here to experience, explore, and find. The spirit playing hide and seek with itself, and then when it finds itself, that's where we are. So we do have an affirmation. I altered it just a little bit. This was the one from Valerie's reading. My outer life exists in alignment with the truth of my innermost authentic self. So if you're in agreement with it and you'd like to join in, I invite you to put some feeling and emotion into this, and we can say it out loud. So here we go. My outer life exists in alignment with the truth of my innermost authentic self. Do we want one more time? One more time with some feeling. Okay. My outer life exists in alignment with the truth of my innermost authentic self. So thank you on that. So then just to kind of wrap it up here, one more quote from Ernest Holmes, the founder of the Science of Mind branch of New Thought philosophy. He says, the ultimate goal of life does not mean that we shall ever arrive at a spiritual destination where everything remains static and inactive. That which to our present understanding seems an ultimate goal will, when attained, be but the starting point for a new and further evolution. So when we talked about self-actualization in that first week, we have this, at least I do, I have this idea that, that's enlightenment. It's this place, and that's what I'm striving for. But when we get there, we are in an infinite universe, and we are constantly expanding and evolving. It's just, we see the next vista. There is no getting there. But like I talked about in the week one, when we look at great teachers like Jesus, the Christ, or the Buddha, from an outside perspective, we're like, that's self-actualization right there. But I'm fairly certain that those people, if they were sitting here, would tell you that they see a whole journey ahead of them of growth and expansion. It never ends. And that's, again, just the beauty and perfection of this universe that we get to experience in. It's always, always more to expand on. And so, with that, I want to encourage you to just, when we talk about self-actualization, it's a process. And every single person here, again, unless you were dragged by a spouse or somebody that said, you have to come with me. Most everybody here you're in it. You are self-actualizing just by the steps that you're taking, by being open-minded, by asking like what's within. This is it. This is how we do it. And it's just that continual process that creates this world that works for everyone. Eventually we'll get there, but then we'll realize the next step. This is a world that works better for everyone, but we will always see another way that it can work even better yet. And that's the excitement, that's the joy of living from that place and that knowing from within. So with that, let's go to that place within, if you're comfortable, however you like to do that. And this is what we call affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment. So we begin by just acknowledging that there's one infinite consciousness, one mind, one life, that life force that is in, through, and everything, as everything. The same energy that orbits the electrons in an atom, creates the galaxies, breathes our lungs for us without us ever having to think. That one infinite life and presence, whatever we call it, it is a conscious awareness, a thing that is aware of itself and its infinite nature, that then manifests as each and every one of us in order to find itself and know itself thoroughly. So as we recognize that one infinite presence, I affirm and avow that I am that. I am a direct manifestation of that. Everything in my being is of that. There's nothing outside of it. Every single person that hears these words is a manifestation, individualized in their own unique expressions and combinations of the infinite qualities and values and traits that exist in our own unique ways that make us appear as individuals and to share the joy, the creativity, the diversity, the love, the expression that only each of us can do in our own unique ways as it combines together in this wonderful tapestry of infinite life experience. So I use these words to affirm and vow that there are deeper qualities within me wishing to emerge, and that these qualities are within all of us in varying degrees, varying traits. So may we each align with what we individually believe to be our own unique qualities in the highest perspectives. May those qualities lead us throughout this week. May we bask in the protection, the golden white light that's always around us, knowing that infinite part of ourselves that's deep within can never be harmed, can never be reduced, nothing can add to it. It's never less than anybody else and never greater than anybody else. It's all the infinite divine expression leading one another back home into that one eternal consciousness that we can visit at any time that we go within, and that we carry this without us. So may that love with the capital L, the driving force of this universe, surround, carry, and be with each and every one of us as we go through our journeys and our expansions throughout this week and beyond. So in gratitude, love, and appreciation for everyone who is on their own individual path of self-actualization, I say thank you. To the law that takes our words and our intentions and makes it manifest in our physical world, I say thank you. To each and every person who's ever asked what's important, who's ever gone within, who has a desired intention to see a world that works for everyone, I say thank you. So may the blessings follow us wherever we go as I release these words and affirm it is so by saying, and so it is.